Welcome to a new episode of Walk in Faith. I'm excited to be sitting down with Michael Lichens. Michael and I were just talking off camera about this book that I happened to come across, which the title in itself, Weird Catholic Handbook. And this is not your typical Catholic theologian book, which I have a stack of books to the left of me. This is not a book that you would see in the back of, your parish. This is one exciting book. So, Michael, thank you so much for sitting down with me.
Thank you. It's a joy to join you, Craig. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. So, just the title doesn't fully give away what this book entails. I mean, you have a book full of werewolves, dragons, Krampus. Tell me a little bit about this book. And
Most of what I quote in the book is in the public domain, and it is from actually from the early modern period or the middle centuries. And I collected basically a bunch of these stories through my history degree and things like that. And these are stories that you may not hear too often. They're not going to be taught in CCD like St. George and the Dragon or things like that. But I thought these are stories that have inspired and really built people up over the centuries that I thought modern people would thoroughly enjoy, even if we don't believe in dragons or ghosts or things like that. These are still great stories that I think were worth telling. So I just wanted to put them all in a handy guidebook to help people explore them more. If they want to go deeper, I recommend a lot of books within the book. And thankfully, a lot of people have taken that invitation.
I mean, there's so many great stories, like you
Yes.
mentioned. What are some of the stories first of all, how did you pick? Because there's so many great ones, but how did you decide on which ones, and what did you learn from some of these stories while you were doing your research?
One of the things I learned was just how many stories there are of saints and strange things, what we would call strange things in our modern era. Like you said, there's a ton. I could have written an entire book that was just about medieval ghost stories, and it would have been 300 pages, and people would have had no end in sight for finding stories of saints and ghosts. But what I learned a lot was that in even the strangest, the most exciting, the most adventurous story, it was always reinforcing the faith. It was always reinforcing our belief in eternity and the afterlife, our beliefs about sin and redemption. And I think these stories tell us a lot about the Catholic faith, all the things you would have learned in CCD, but in a way that's in a story that is compelling, it's sometimes frightening, but oftentimes very joyful because it always points to the victory of Christ over the grave and over our enemies.
You're right. I mean, the Saint Christopher story, how he slayed a dragon, right?
Yes,
Imagine teaching that story. And my mother teaches CCD, right? Imagine I teach
yes,
my son. I mean, he'd be a lot more interested. I was telling him about was it the werewolf story where they gave him the Eucharist? Is it the werewolf?
yes, the Werewolves of Ossuary.
I mean, I mean, it's interesting because now you can think about how, these modern, we'll call them horror films, how a lot of these stories or characters, the Loch Ness Monster is, in a sense, biblically based. Like a lot of them started off as stories from the Bible, then were reinterpreted or interpreted, and you see them on the big screen now, but most people would never know that the roots originally came from biblical stories, which, I mean, most people don't know that. So as I'm watching this or reading this and reading theology of course it's a sin, right, for us to which we would debate, right? Would if I believe in certain in magic, if I illusions, magic in general, like so. Then I'm thinking about that as I'm reading the book, and I'm like, wait a second, but a lot of this or mystics, like what median it could be, a sin, or it could be something that goes against our faith in Jesus Christ. But then there were a lot of mystics back then. So where is the balance? Like, how do we decide what is a sin and what is biblically based?
Well, it always comes down to take the classic story of making the deal with the devil so that you have the power to talk to the dead. You're doing that for your glory, for your power, to have power over what is only supposed to be in God's domain. And that's where the sin comes in. Whereas, say, a mystic who is able to discern spirits or see angels, you'll find that half the time those people do not want any glory. They are actually the furthest thing from glory seekers. In the cases of, say, the Cure de Ars or St. Padre Pio, it was sometimes a burden that they could see spirits and could connect with them. So it was never done in a way that is trying to trample on God's territory. It's always done in the service of a greater thing, and that's why God would allow people to say have a visit from ghostly spirits or from angelic hosts.
Mm.
Not, but it's never done. God says, okay, you can see angels now, go make $1 million.
Oh,
That's where the sin can come in.
no, I agree with you. I completely agree because there are people that, like you said, do sort of take advantage of a lot of people. And it's interesting when you read
Hmm.
about the mystics. And then, I did a lot of research on objects and attachments, which you mentioned in the book as well, and that their spirits could attach to certain objects, and sometimes it's demonic, and sometimes it's not. But when you start to do research on that, and it's just it sort of it confirms as an afterlife, right? That
Yes.
people do have the ability to communicate with people that have gone on, especially like the way we speak to saints, like they have the ability to work through us or work through certain people. And then like the Krampus thing, as I'm reading it, I'm sort of joking with my son. I'm like, imagine if we like well, most people don't know what Krampus is, but if you think about how I'm threatening him that I'm going to get him coal, and imagine in the story of Krampus that he would stuff kids in a sack. Like
Yes.
like tell me, like most people, what's Krampus? Like just enlighten me.
Sure. Krampus is one of several monsters that exist in the Alps of Europe, either in the Czech Republic, where they call him Czech, or in the German-speaking world, where they call him Krampus. And he is a monster that was subdued by Saint Nicholas in several stories. So whenever he is, you'll have a tradition where somebody is dressed as Saint Nicholas and going through the town, quizzing children on their catechisms, giving them little gifts for what they've done. And then he would have Krampus on a leash. And Krampus is there for the naughty kids, the kids who aren't doing their chores, who don't follow their catechism, and he'll chase them around with a reed, or he'll put them in a bag and threaten to take them off. It's mostly in good fun, a little bit frightening, but it's mostly in good fun.
Yeah, no, I mean they've had there's been a lot of films which
Yes.
people probably and you watch even now I just got invited to a screening for a new film that's coming out and it's a religious film we'll call it, but it's about demonic possessions, which I
Mm,
honestly struggle with. I struggle in the sense that
sure.
I don't want to allow myself to open up that door. And just from doing research, especially with Ouija boards and all these, we're inviting some of these spirits in. So we have to be careful. Like, not this
Yes.
book is not that, but when we there that world exists, and you talk about it from the biblical point of view, but it does exist in these objects, like the Ouija board or objects we buy, like at flea markets, or we buy certain items that sometimes these items have attachments and we can allow these spirits to come in into our house or into they could really affect us and traumatize us. So you tell these stories so people that don't believe it, when you start to go through your book, and yeah, you make I don't say a joke, but it's very light, the werewolves, but these are true stories. I mean, there's so many accounts of them. So I mean, you obviously believe in the supernatural, right?
Oh, yes. No, I absolutely believe in the supernatural. And the strangest part about it is the older I get, the more I believe in the supernatural. Whereas, in my 20s, I was a lot more skeptical. Like, I thought the supernatural was cool, but if you'd asked me, "Oh, do saints ever levitate?" I would have told you no. Now I'm very much of the opinion, yes, they levitate. We have the accounts, we have hundreds of eyewitnesses. It happens. But the thing about that is always, as you keep pointing out, is we have to be careful. To paraphrase Chesterton, the world doesn't believe in the supernatural, so they think they're free to play around with it. Whereas I believe in the supernatural, so I want to leave it alone. Spirits aren't that interesting. I'm a spirit, you're a spirit. We have to always remember that and always keep those boundaries that God has given us that are almost like a fence around a playground. We're allowed to be in this, but we can't go beyond a certain limit. And that's something that's always important to look. And that's why I would always caution people, don't mess with these spirits, don't mess with the dead, don't mess with demons. That's the path to ruin.
No, you're right. And you know what I struggle with is that, and this in society, right? Culture, they sort
Hmm.
depict the symbol, the evil eye, and the way
Yes.
they pushed it on our children. You know what I am referring to? It became like sort of jewelry, and it became bracelets, and you see it all over the place, and they don't realize what they're inviting. I don't even think the parents realize what they're inviting in. Like these, or you go. I always talk. If you ever go to the Five Below, it's a beautiful store for children, and if you go into the book aisle, it's all demonic books.
Hmm.
spells and witchcraft and voodoo and juju and all of this, and they put it in a store where they have where kids have access to it, right? And kids pick it up thinking it's fun because I can learn how to, maybe create a spell or rocks. I mean, my son is
Hmm.
obsessed with these rocks and he likes them for the beauty, but he doesn't realize what the symbolism behind that is. And they're everywhere. Everywhere you look, everywhere you go, you're sort of this world is being pushed on our children. So we have to go back to the basics and know that this is true. I mean, it's in the
Yes.
Bible. I mean, this is not something we need to play around with. But when I have these conversations, even the other day, a friend Anthony, well-known man, he's an actor, and we're debating about UFOs and certain things, phenomena, and he's like, that's impossible. And he's making a joke about it. Like, I think having these conversations with Christians and Catholics, especially, they just brush it off. They think it's a joke. I mean, I can't imagine when you come over, if you come over my house, I'd love to have a conversation with you. But when you're having family dinner or Christmas dinner and you start talking about Krampus or you talk about the Loch Ness Monster, what do your family and friends say to you?
I get a lot of laughter. I'll be first and foremost there, and part of that is I like to make jokes of things, but I also think what surprises a lot of people is that when I approach these stories, especially for writing this book, I wanted to, no matter what my skepticism or whatever, I wanted to take that the people in the past were not lying. They were telling the truth when they wrote down these stories. And so I wanted to take them at their face. And what I find when I start doing that is you start seeing a lot of things differently, like going back to the UFO phenomenon, which I have a lot of opinions. I'm not opposed to the idea that aliens exist and might have visited the planet Earth, but a lot of times I hear from the UFO communities, it sounds like spiritualism to me. I was reading the other day, there's this UFO expert who claims he can psychically contact
Dr.
aliens and
Stephen Greer.
yes,
Dr.
Stephen
Stephen
Greer,
Greer.
thank you.
But it's a
And
form of meditation, right? It's the way,
met and
it's how
prayer.
we, exactly. It's how I'm not, listen, I don't know him. I don't know him personally, but when I'm
Yes,
praying and meditating, isn't that the same thing, the way we communicate to angels or saints or to God? Is
ex
it similar?
exactly. It looks similar to me. You're supposedly contacting these otherworldly entities only through your mind, and you're even bringing them to you through a psychic contact. How is that not angels to me? What is that other than spirituality? And so it's fascinating to look at it. And some of my friends who love UFOs get a little cranky at me, always pointing out the spiritual connections. But for me, it's so obvious that it has to be commented on.
I agree. This is exactly what I was debating with a friend the other day, and there's a book I got from Sophia Institute. I think it was Genesis, the Book of Genesis, but I forgot the
Wonderful.
title, and it's just speaks about how we can't limit God. I don't
Yes.
think aliens or other beings are made in the image and likeness of Christ, but I think the chances of there not being other forms, whether they're life forms or what, I don't want to define them, I think is slim, and I think we do need to be a little bit open-minded. And I
Hmm.
wish we could have these conversations with our fellow believers, and then they should read the book and say, before you judge me on whether it's the, dragons or the Loch Ness Monster, you should read the book. And interesting too, like if you do research like you have on UFOs, especially, and they talk about, some of these signs that they saw, biblical signs, and they called them UFOs or they called them saints, and maybe they were something else that visited. They were probably spiritual beings and they didn't know how to define them. So at the time, they said they were dragons or they said they were something else because of the sort of the lack of explanation or the definition or the modern words that they were able to use. But something visited this planet, and we know it was, like you said, spiritual beings. It was, I don't want to say they were aliens, but they were definitely something that visited. And we know through our faith in Jesus Christ, there's symbolism. They're angels. There was something
Yes.
that visited this planet and continues to visit. And I believe, and you believe, that it's whether they're angels, they're saints. There's too much information and too much out there for us to not believe that there is something more than what we see here.
Absolutely. One of the goals when I was compiling this book of weird tales was I wanted to reinvigorate the mystical side of the Catholic faith. I want people to see that we're not just, the Catholic faith is not just a list of rules, a list of do's and do nots. It's an entire philosophy of this world and the next world. And this means that we are also bound together much deeply. We're not just, fellow parishioners or friends. Even when death comes along, that doesn't interrupt anything. It's just one more step until we meet the awesome judgment seat of Christ. And we can still commune with each other. We can still pray for one another. We can still help one another. Even between death and life, we're still able to help one another. And for me, that's one of the most beautiful aspects of the Catholic faith.
Mm. So from your research, I mean, we talk about demonic possessions. Do we have the ability, or do you need to be a saint, we'll say, or do you need to be Peter to have the ability to sort of, you know, remove a demonic possession? Do we have that ability?
We have that ability. Father Gabriel Amorth, who's probably the most famous exorcist of my lifetime, he died in 2016, wrote numerous books about his life as an exorcist. He often gave prayers for what the laity could pray. Only in the Catholic Church, only a priest can be a full-on exorcist and do the major rite of exorcism. But all of us can pray the Litany of Saints, for example, which is a powerful prayer against the demonic. And we were given the prayer of Saint Michael, which is one of the most powerful prayers that every exorcist I know of uses in their day-to-day life. And we're allowed to have that. So Father Amorth says that even the sign of the cross is powerful enough to make most demons go away. And if you bring Mary into it, they are terrified of Mary, absolutely terrified of her. So we have all the tools at our disposal. But if we ever need to do major battle, that's where the priest exorcists come in.
Mm. Have you ever been present during an exorcism?
Of a minor exorcism of a house, I've been present, and that was one of the strangest experiences of my life in terms of like you feel something in the room almost immediately, even before the ritual begins, and you start to feel things throughout. The priest told me, don't get distracted by anything, just keep praying with me, keep saying amen when it's time to say amen, and keep your focus on Christ this entire time.
Wow.
And it's a strange one. Like the hairs on my arm stood up. I could feel something like touching me and things like that, like all kinds of
Mm.
strange things that at the time really almost distracted me and really shook me of of my certainties of this world.
I've been present several times where we had objects when we were doing research on them, and they were able to pull spirits out. And I had to leave the room. I had my rosary beads and I was praying, and it made me so uncomfortable. And I couldn't stay in the room. The voices, you feel it, you hear it. I mean, it's real.
Hmm.
I don't want to play around with it, but I'm like you, intrigued by it. To me, it's just something that I want to know more about, but not in the sense where I want to welcome it in. But I'll tell you, I was afraid when I went home, and I had to ask a priest, and do spirits follow you home? Because I was
Hmm.
concerned. When you were writing this book or you were editing this book, were you concerned at all? Did you feel like anything was happening? I mean, even just uncomfortable rest or anything?
I was going through actually my own spiritual trials when I was writing this book. When I decided I was going to write this book, it was right when my wife decided she wanted to separate from me. She was very amicable and kind to me, but it was still a difficult period of time that called into question a lot of my values, my beliefs, my identity. And so I felt those temptations, the heavy temptations of like, you're not worthy, you're not worth writing about. No one's going to believe a word you say. And, it was more of a spirit of despair, which I found to be the hardest of spirits to fight against. And it's still one I have to fight against constantly. And I do a lot of prayer and meditating to not fall into despair. And so that was my big temptation. I'm glad to say I didn't have any manifestations of spirits in my rooms or anything, but definitely had the spiritual struggles of, well, what is this? Do you actually believe this? And what does it say when you do believe this?
Wow, that's fascinating. And one thing too, just to highlight too, because I got calls recently from a gentleman, and won't mention, of course, that, and this is just even from doing the research and speaking to people. A lot of times, they have this manifestation, or they believe that spirits are attacking them. I mean, I've seen videos and people have sent them to me, and after doing research and investigation. A lot of times it's not. Sometimes it's they have issues with mental health, or sometimes they're off the
Of
medication.
course.
A lot of times it's the orbs and it's really dust. I mean, so there's other things that happen, but what we're referring to here are things that are true,
Hmm.
biblically based. And like you said, Michael, you've had experiences. I have. I've done a lot of research on this, especially with objects. And it's true. This book is, we call it the Weird Catholic Handbook. And yeah, we can play fun at it but really it's a great book. I'm telling you, when I
Thank
saw
you.
this, I said, wow, this is not something that I talk to people all day. I got another conversation in 30 minutes. This is my third one today. And this topic never comes up, especially when we're talking about it from biblically based, you know, the truth. I mean, so I commend you. I really do. And where can people find out more about this book or
They
just
can,
other books that you've written?
well, they can go to my website, mlichens.com, where I highlight my writing. I do a lot of writing on CatholicExchange.com, and they can find the book through Sophia Institute Press or at their local bookstore.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for your time. I advise people to buy the book, and if my son Mario was bad this Christmas, I'm gonna tell him no coal. I'm gonna get you Krampus. But we should tell our kids, remind our kids that Krampus will come and what'd you say, stuff them in a sack if they don't behave, because the coal thing or taking away the cell phone does not work anymore. Now it's stuff them in a sack the way Krampus would do. Well, Michael, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, Craig. Thank you so much for having me.
Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Walk in Faith. Always remember you have the ability to inspire and evangelize through your words and actions. God bless you. And that's my dog Brownie, who is barking in the background.